get into our last film of the week here, The Pink Cloud. The Pink Cloud is a Brazilian sci-fi thriller. It's certainly like a dystopian, I think is fair to say. And it's the directorial debut of Brazilian filmmaker Luli, I think Gerbase, I don't know how to pronounce her name correctly, but this stars another actor named Renata de Lélis, and Eduardo Mendonça, Kaya Rodrigues, Helena Becker, and many more. And this film actually premiered at Sundance last year, so a year ago, January 2021. It was made before COVID, but you will notice right away that this film is eerily prescient. Like, it is truly amazing. Yeah. It is a movie sort of about COVID before COVID happened. Right. Because the setup is that there's this pink cloud that kills people, and so everybody has to stay indoors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an instantaneous death, like 10 seconds, you're out.
Yes. So everybody has to stay indoors for a long period of time, and it's one of those things where at first people are just like, oh, this will be like a couple of weeks. And man, this movie, it really captures it. It really captures what actually happened. It is so bizarre.
It's like fascinating how well it captures that sense of dread in a way that, like, I'm sure we're going to get, like, we've gotten a handful already, but we're going to get a lot of, like, pandemic movies or lockdown movies, and they're all going to try to capture this feeling, and I don't think any of them are going to do it quite as well. Well, maybe some will, but I don't think a lot of them will capture this feeling quite as well as this movie does, personally.
Yeah, I hate to be pessimistic, because I want to hope for the best, but yeah, I cannot disagree with you. I think that certainly is certainly more likely than not. Yeah, it is funny too, because the tagline for this film, it's so funny. The official tagline is, any resemblance to actual facts is purely coincidental.
Well, yeah, that's because we forgot to mention at the beginning of the film, there is that title card where it's like, this movie was written in 2017 and filmed in 2019. Yeah. Any relationship to current events, like you said, is purely coincidental. And when you see, I didn't know much about this film going into it. I went into it fairly blind, so I was like, that seems like an odd thing to write. Like, like whatever. Like, I've heard, like, it kind of reminds you of the pandemic. I was like, okay, maybe it'll be like some similarities or whatever. And then you watch it and you're like, oh man, like this is it. Like, this is what it was like. She got it down exactly.
Yep. So the setup for this movie is these two people named Giovanna and Iago. They just started like hooking up. They're in their late 20s. We got another movie about people in their late 20s.
Yeah.
But
talk about a meet cute situation.
A meet cute. They literally just met.
Right.
And they they decide to hook up like right after, I think it was like a party or something. And then that's when this happens. A mysterious cloud shows up, and it like we said, it'll kill you. So they have to like go indoors, and time starts to pass, and they're kind of just like stuck together. And it's like one of these weird things where they kind of have to figure out their relationship. They also have to figure out, like, she has family members who are stuck in these precarious situations, and like they can communicate using technology and everything, and they have like these delivery systems, but nobody can go outside. And then time just continues to pass, and it's sort of about how they're trying to figure out their problems. They're trying to sort of like reconceive what their lives can be. It's a very existential movie in that respect. Right. I think it's kind of a fascinating movie. My question for you is, do you think it's a cathartic movie? Like, do you think it's the kind of movie that like made you feel okay about, or made you feel anything positive about this pandemic experience we've been going through? Not that it has to. I'm just curious.
I don't know if it made me feel positive about it. It did give me a lot of reflection about it, even though that, like we said, that wasn't the intent, I don't think. It allowed me to kind of think back to like 2020 and like where I was, and when I was more housebound, and that kind of, like you said, that existential dread of just like not really knowing what time is anymore. Like, it's now March, it's now April, it's now June, it's now July, and like there are like touchstones, like now it's my birthday, or like now we celebrate Easter, and now it's like the 4th of July, but it's still like we're inside, and like the weather is warmer, but it's like we're outside looking in, or sorry, inside looking out. And it's like what really makes a difference here. And I think that sense of like trying to kind of find some new normalcy with it, and trying to connect with people online makes it seem a little bit more casual, but there is that kind of like prolonged sense of like, well, what is the answer here. Like, what do we do? Like, there's no like way to really move forward correctly. And we get like two conflicting viewpoints here from our two characters in a way that like they see they have similar ideas about like what this means, but like their perspectives start to flip over time or become more exaggerated over time in ways that feel fairly believable, even though time itself kind of becomes more inscrutable to figure out exactly like how long it's been. Like there are a
like
couple
it
moments
becomes cloudy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's it pulls off a balance I think is really hard to achieve, and I think it captured that really well. I'm assuming, I don't know if I've read anywhere about like what the filmmaker's original intent was of the film. My guess was probably like climate change, kind of similar to like Don't Look Up, where it's just like kind of like what does it mean to like get older and like try to raise a family at a time when like the world itself, like with climate change and extreme weathers and just like general disarray with the world, like what does it mean to try to like kind of find that that sense of normalcy in a life where you don't really know how long we have left. But have you read anything about like what her original intent was with the film?
No, but I think where I sort of landed with like the intention that I can perceive is I think she wanted to make a relationship drama first and foremost, and like sort of use the worldwide cataclysm as sort of like something to accelerate that, to really like capture what it's like when two people who go through any sort of like catastrophe or a tragedy together, it can just sort of like speed run them really being together more out of obligation and like necessity than like true love. And I think that to me is like where this film is probably the most interesting. And especially because I think it's a really smart idea too. It's like you could easily do this movie without the idea of a pink cloud. You could just say like, oh, you can't go outside because blah, blah, blah.
Like
but by making it this
like
sort
that.
of surreal color that like is always like there. It's always, because it's like always in the back of their heads. I think it's a really nice touch. It's a really nice like atmospheric mood setting thing that ties into the plot. It's like, and even the color, the choice of pink, it's not just the neon glow of it that sort of like evokes that sort of like eeriness of like, this is weird. Like, this is not something that we're used to. The sky doesn't usually look like that. Like it reminded me a lot of like when the first year of the pandemic, I remember like that time because of the wildfires in California, outside was just orange. Like the entire sky was like this really hazy orange. And we all woke up and it was super, like we woke up to this dark orange, like neon haze coming through the windows. And like, I had a little bit of like, you know, reliving that trauma watching this movie a bit, honestly. I was just like, oh my gosh, like, because that was truly like an alarming situation. So I think, yeah, as in terms of like this movie sort of like nailing what life is like right now, I don't think it could have done it any better without actually going through it.
Yeah, I mean, even especially in the second half or in like the last third act or so, where it nails like very specific things that, you know, I would never, if I were to write a story like this in 2017 or 2018, I would never think to like put that in the film. And they do, and it proves to be very, like you said, precedent, because it has like a lot of things that were true to how things panned out, at least in the US. So yeah, it's a lot of stuff like that. Yeah. And like I was saying before, it does remind me a bit of The Mist. I don't know if you ever saw that film. Just like that kind of idea of like being forced to shelter with somebody. And I agree with you that like that kind of sense of like, you have to like literally sort of like play house here. Like you kind of like you're forced in a situation. That's sort of like what adulthood is as well. Like you like don't ever really like get to that point where you're like an adult. You're just kind of like, oh, like I guess it's like what we're supposed to do now, or like, you know, it's stuff like that it evokes very well and very and like we said, a very precedent way that I found to be very not cathartic, but like very engaging, I guess.
Yeah, like if anything, there are things that happen in that third act, like revelations and like what people have started doing that I was just like, oh my gosh. It does sort of put into perspective. Like, I think we can look at the pandemic right now, and I mean, after watching this movie, we can at least be, and I hate to even say this because I don't want to be flippant or dismissive of like a lot of the pain and trauma and awful things that have happened, but like we have been able to go outside. Like we have been able to, like, a lot of people have been able to resume a life of normalcy. We have like vaccines, we have, you know, things that have mitigated this pandemic. So it's like, this is obviously the very extreme example of that, because these people can't even go outside. And I think like we only really had that for like a couple of weeks where people were kind of scared to go outside. But I mean, even then, lots of people did anyway. They were just, not outside for long periods of time.
Sure.
So yeah, I do think it's important to keep that in perspective.
Yeah, I mean, there's like at one point where she's like, can't we just have like a mask or something like that? So they can't even like go outside and like shield themselves from something without, falling to their death, in some cases quite literally. But yeah, I mean, it's I don't know how much more I want to give away, because there's a lot of stuff I don't want to reveal. But I mean, the stuff that stands out to me is just like the very minute stuff. There's one scene that really stands out to me involving Hangman. It's very odd. It's weird to like think that might be like one of the sexiest scenes I've seen in a few years. It's not like if you describe someone's like, that's kind of weird, but it's like the way it's filmed, especially from this filmmaker, it's just very,
and the anticipation leading up to it, right? It's like out of context, it makes no sense, but then you're like, oh, when you're actually watching it. I would say too, like one thing about this movie that I really appreciated was that they didn't get bogged down in like the government's reaction to everything. Like it wasn't a movie where it was just like constantly like, we have to try this and we need to do this, and the government's try. It just sort of like let stuff play out, and it let you fill in the blanks. It had moments of dialogue that would explain like where people are at, but it would just, I don't know. I'm glad that it wasn't like Contagion. It wasn't like this sort of everybody trying to figure out a problem together. Sure. It's just not. I thought this is the right approach for this movie. I think it just focus on the stuff that's most important to the characters, which is going through the situation.
Yeah, and I mean, I assume this is a small budget film. Like I can't imagine this costs more than like $1 million or $2 million to make. Probably a couple thousand, or like a couple $100,000.
I was gonna say, you're gonna be like, I can imagine it being more like 90 million.
Yeah, but no, but I mean, like I think like the way that it is able to, from what I can recall, it's pretty much all centralized into this one location. But kind of similar to Bo Burnham's Inside, like they find a lot of interesting ways to make that one centerpiece visually interesting, or do a lot of stuff that isn't super flashy but makes it visually distinct and not lose any luster in that respect. So
yeah,
I think it's very commendable.
It's interesting you bring up the Bo Burnham Inside thing, just because one thing this movie does share with that is it's also sort of commenting on how like technology and advertising and media in general is reacting to this sort of thing. Some people are making TV shows out of it, and like just sort of like highlighting the absurdity of human behavior in the midst of these life, generational just like events that I think that we're in the middle of something like that right now. And it's something that we're sort of experiencing after not really experiencing anything this disruptive since, I want to say, like World War II, probably, in terms of like the entire world just like halting for something. Yeah.
No, I mean, that definitely reminds me of like in 2020, like I didn't watch like a lot of TV, but I remember like if I did, there'd be like, you'd see like a commercial for like Papa John's or something where like everyone's wearing a mask and it's just like, times are tough, but here at Papa John's, we care about you. And it's just like, what is happening? Right. Yeah, exactly. It's just like,
well, there were commercials. I remember like there were literally condom commercials for like, well, you're stuck inside anyway. It's like, that may be true, but you don't have to.
Right. I mean, I guess it's better than them being like, go out there, have fun, live your life.
Yeah, just being totally tone deaf. Yeah, like showing people like running through a crowd,
coughing on one another, sneezing on each other, and all that. And yeah, whatever. You getting a call?
No, I just got like this weird. My phone just started like lighting up and doing something weird. That kind of like spooked me a little bit. I was like, "Is there something going on outside?" I'm like looking behind, looking at the window. No, but we're good. Life is still, civilization is still in. But yeah, I just think it's just. We're kind of going through this weird thing too, where like TV shows these days and movies in general too are just sort of like, how do we address COVID? Like sometimes shows are like, oh, the pandemic's over because we got vaccinated, and then some shows are sort of like, it never happened. And I kind of appreciate how like Joe Pera, it's like still 2018, and they even like mention that. Like canonically, the show still takes place in 2018, so they don't even have to like deal with it.
Did you see? There was like an article I think in 2020 when they wrote, like different show writers wrote like what their characters would be doing during the pandemic, and he wrote one for like what Joe Pera and Joe Firestone, what their characters would be doing during the pandemic. You have to look that up. It's quite funny.
Right, and I know you haven't really seen the new season, so
Not yet,
I won't say
yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
But I mean, there were all kinds of different approaches. I remember like Superstore, like they released their final season and they had a bunch of episodes devoted to COVID. I mean, it's just, I think that there are a lot of weird responses media wise to this pandemic. It's so entertaining to me for that in that respect, that one of the ones that really captures the dread, the existentialism, the grief, the trauma is this one that I think clearly somebody had in mind. Like it's a stroke of, it's a clap of thunder, a shot of lightning. I can't describe how unbelievable it is that this exists, but
Yeah.
I think it's good. I think it's hard for me to recommend it.
Right.
You know, it's like, who wants this?
I think I think it's quite good, and
it is good.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a hard thing to pull off in terms of like kind of keeping your attention, and you know, obviously, like we say, it doesn't really have a sunny disposition, I guess, fittingly enough with the clouds. But yeah, I didn't feel like it was like oppressively bleak or anything. It just felt very true to like what the situation was like. And I mean, I agree that I don't think it's going to win everyone over. And I think something like this that, you know, even if it just reminds them of the pandemic, it gives them hives. Like I understand wanting to watch something else instead. But I mean, I felt this would be a fairly beneficial film for helping me kind of contemplate what happened the past year. So even though, like we said, wasn't the deliberate intent of the filmmakers, it did give me a lot of proper reflection on this time. And yeah, I think, you know, art should be that for a lot of reasons. And, you know, this is a good film in many respects, but certainly in that case.
Yeah, I think it tickles me to imagine the synopsis for this director's next film, like causing a worldwide panic. You know?
Oh, yeah.
like all the stock market crashes.
Yeah. I hope she just makes something very calm and like you know, very much like two people win a bunch of money and give it to everybody.
Wow.
That's your next movie, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Unfortunately, I don't expect that would be the case, but we can dream, I suppose. All right, let's play the Rotten Tomatoes game for The Pink Cloud. Not a super long movie, just under 2 hours. And I think it's just the right amount. I think.
I forgot to tell you, Worst Person in the World, 128 minutes. So
I saw 121. So apparently there's some conflicting info running around. We got to figure that out. But it's around there. So The Pink Cloud, Rotten Tomatoes, we have 47 critics who braved the outdoors to see this film, to log, to review it. What do you think the RT score is for The Pink Cloud?
78%?
You keep going in the 70s when these bad boys are in the 90s.
This is not, that actually makes sense. Yeah.
They're on top of it. 91% on Rotten Tomatoes. Yeah. Now we have an audience score this time. This one is fewer than 50 ratings. So, you know, audiences are still getting around to it. They're like, sorry, I got not in the mood right now to watch this, but I'll get to it. But what do you think the ones you have, what do you think they rated it?
It's tricky. 68%?
40%.
Yeah, I was going to say, I figured it was pretty low.
Yeah, people are just kind of like, read the room.
Check, please.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, what about Letterboxd? We have a different crowd on Letterboxd, right? Kind of a mix of critics and film fans. So what do you think? What do you think the average rating on Letterboxd is?
3.4?
3.3. You're pretty good with the Letterboxd ones. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm pretty impressed. And not a lot of people have logged it. 2.5 thousand. That's far, far lower than the other two films we talked about this week. But that said, some people are seeing it. It just like is getting its release. So we should make that clear.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, because we were debating whether or not to even cover this film. And you were like, should I watch it? I was like, yes.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's depress ourselves before Sundance.
Yeah. Wow.
But okay. Yeah. Speaking of, I think that'll do it for our show. Mm-hmm. And hopefully this episode was eerily prescient of a time that has not happened yet. We'll see.
Yeah.
And thank you as always for listening. We'll be back soon to talk about all the latest stuff, or at least most of the stuff we saw at Sundance and more. Don't forget, you can subscribe to Cinemaholics. You can do all kinds of fun things like connect with us on social media. Please do. Our show notes has links to everything that we think you should link to. So take a look. That's it for us, though, for now. Signing off from the Internet California, I'm John Negroni.
And from Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Washington.
See you next time.